Hello, everyone, Star Wars fans, Star Wars aficionados, everybody who's watching. I am Dan Tartaglione, also known as DTartag1, coming to you live tonight with a special GEMPC event. Tonight we have a very exciting game from two of the legends of Star Wars CCG. First off, you know him, you love him, you probably have bought a card from him once or twice before. We have Brian Fred. He is pretty he's pretty high, heavily. He's pretty seated nicely. He's one of the top, I believe, two seeds out of the event. He's going to be facing off against one of the other legends of the game. Clearly, you know him, you love him. You probably got beat by his Mind Which You Have Learned deck at one point. Brian Fred's going to be playing Scott Lingrell. We know that Brian has decided he's going to play with the dark side, and so that means obviously Scott's going to be playing light side. The real question now is, what is Scott going to be playing? Is he going to be playing Mind What You've Learned? Is he going to be playing? He's been playing like a lot the Wookiee win type of a deck recently as well. So, but before we go ahead and get into that, let's go ahead and check out the top 32 bracket. So right now, into the round of 16, we have Joe Olson. He's waiting on either Connor Britton or Kuhn. Matt Harrison Trainer advanced over Tom Kelly. He's waiting on the winner of Cal Aldred versus Carl Koenig. Martin DeBoeuf and Nathan Russell they're waiting for to play their game. Justin Branch, Brad Kipple as well. Greg Shaw versus Timo Dussel, two pretty good players, definitely making their way. I mean, both have shown they both were in the Outrider Cup. They both made it into the OCS playoffs before, so really good players. Bill Kafer waiting on Wayne Culler or Mike Kessling. Again, we have Brian Fred versus Scott Lingrell. They will whoever wins that will advance in playoff against Sam Tashima. Daniel Amore advanced over Jeff Levine. He will await the winner of Charlie Arlinson or Chris Werfs. And then the upset specialist himself, Logan Petit, will wait on either Anthony Michael Howard or Michael Pistone. So definitely a lot of interesting matches to come. Definitely a lot of interesting games to see what exactly is going to happen. We are waiting on Scott and B. Fred. So once we get the word from them, we'll go ahead and get this one going. And again, a lot of interesting stuff going on in Star Wars CCG. Again, we have the March OCS has already started. As you can see, we have Matthew Harrison Trainer playing Johnny Chu, one of Johnny Chu's sons. We have a Thrawn versus a 0 Hour match up. That's a pretty nice. It's a nice little matchup. While we're waiting on our two players for their GEMPC match, let's go ahead and bounce into that game really quick. Yeah, I like what I believe that is Apollo. So I do like what Apollo is doing for this match. So I mean, he's got some pretty nice board control. But Matt Harrison Trainer is coming down with Prince Shizor to Lothal. But I did get word from Brian Fred that he's just waiting on Scott, and Scott is in the chat. So let's go ahead and wait for our two players for one of the players to set up the table. Just messaged our Brian Fred, letting him know. Yes, this is a 10:45 game. I do know that both they're only going to be playing the one game tonight. I'm not sure as to when they're going to be playing the second game, but once we do know, make sure you guys stay tuned to Twitter, forums, Slack, Discord, all of our social media. James Martin and his team will probably get advertised. So Yeah, I see that Scott and Brian are both in the chat. Brian asking if Scott is ready. So again, the March March OCS has started already. The GEMPC is still going along. The Jawa Cup just ended with Connor Britton taking down the top spot. And then coming up very shortly is the first ever Indianapolis Eclipse event. Probably going to be a long time before we have another one of those. Okay, Brian has put up the table, just waiting for Scott to join. And I definitely think this match is going to be interesting. Like, again, Scott is a player who just plays interesting decks. And then on the flip side, Brian, if you did pay attention to the Outrider, the most previous Outrider Cup, we know that Brian Fred was one of the 3 players who went 2-0. So both players have done really well recently. Scott, again, making the top 8 at the Supreme Southern Showdown. Okay, we have On the Verge of Greatness versus Mind What You Have Learned. If you had both of those decks, you are a liar. Nobody had both of those decks. You probably had Mind What You Have Learned, but interesting enough, On the Verge of Greatness, this is a deck that we know that Brian Fred has played before, but it's interesting to see him play it now. Brian going with Alert My Star Destroyer V, Quad Drive Yards V, and or Shield V. Scott starting out with Walkling V, The Way of Things, non-V, one of the few non-V cards in the deck. And again, Brian starting with the Death Star at Parsec 4. He's got Comet's Primary Ignition on it. He just needs to get the Super Laser. Then he has the Shield Gate at Scarif. And Scott also going with Grappling Hook V as well. Okay, here we go. Rebel Leadership from Scott on his on Brian's. Before Brian activates, Brian does grab Grand Admiral Thrawn with the Endor Shield. Scott going out and getting probably a general here. Greg Shaw, again, he is in the round of top 16. He's waiting on Timo Dusel to play his match. Scott going out and grabbing Obi-Wan Kenobi V. Don't see a lot of him nowadays outside of like Diplo. Brian going out and getting Admiral Piet as well. So, Greg, I know that you're a teammate of Brian Fred. Any idea why Brian went with this On the Verge of Greatness deck? Is this the one that he's been playing? Like, we know he's played this deck before. I know he made the top 4 at an Ender Grand Prix with this deck before, but why did he go with this deck? Any insight? As we see Scott going and grabbing the Yoda's Hut. And Brian's going to start activating. He gets 8 Force. Okay, so Brian did not tell his teammates, the new allies, any information. I'm assuming that the team would have said, Brian, please don't play that deck. It's not a good deck. You should not be playing it. But Brian, being the person that he is, probably would not have listened. As we see Brian get his grabber out, and he's going to pay 2 Force to go get a Battleground system with Quad Drive Yards. Yes, he did play the deck before, Greg. Again, we said that. So there's Milwaukee. Again, if you, it's an anagram of Milwaukee. I'm not going to try and pronounce the real name. as unfortunately I am very bad with pronunciations. Tatooine going down as well from Brian's hand. I feel like it's a little too slow for the current meta, but I might be wrong. Brian might be onto something here. Naboo going down from hand as well. So Brian with 2 systems in his opening hand. He does have 6 force left. Again, thank you guys for joining us tonight. It is our pleasure. And I will say this, I'm glad to see that Brian is going with On the Verge of Greatness. First of all, it was the winning card of the top V card designs bracket. We did that a couple of years ago, so that was the winning card. And the other reason is, if you take a look, that's the logo for the Indianapolis Eclipse event. So very fitting from Brian Fred. As we see him just draw some cards. Again, Brian going to be activating at least 12 on his next turn. He does save 2 and will pass turn over to Scott. Do expect Scott to go get a card with the Dagobah V system. Again, thank you all for joining us. It is almost 11 o'clock on the East Coast here, so we'll definitely be giving away some GEMP AI packs. If just recently, Jared Napolitano and the marketing team have announced that you can now buy GEMP, the first, second, and third series of the GEMP AI packs on GEMP at 20 gold apiece. And thank you, Zeke, for subscribing for 38 months. That's a nice little streak there you got going on. Greg explaining the deck a little bit to Zeke in the chat as we see Scott going and retrieving with Walkling. Now, the reason he did this early on is because after he gets At Peace V out, the light side player is not going to be able to retrieve any force moving forward. As we see Dagobah Yoda's Hut going down from hand. And Greg Shaw, again, thank you, Greg, for subscribing for 25 months. Subscribing to the PC Twitch channel is one way of getting some of those awesome foil AI cards as well as foil cards. So all you got to do is, if you have an Amazon Prime account, you can do it that way. And there is At Peace V going on to Dagobah. Again, Greg Zinn Design was the original designer. He provided the concept for the card. So if you played Mind Which You Have Learned and you like to retrieve, you can blame Greg for turning off your retrieval with At Peace. There's Yoda V going down to the hut, as well as Daughter of Skywalker. Again, Mind What You've Learned will now target her. There's Great Warrior, so now Scott will begin testing on his next control phase. Hopefully Leia will pass the grade and complete the tests for Scott. Scott goes into his battle, move, and then draw phase as we see him draw 1 card into hand from his force pile. He will draw the second card as well. Moving into Brian Fred's second turn. Scott going out and getting a card with Dagobah V. Probably going to get himself a Jedi's Test. Yes, he's going to grab a Jedi's Strength. Test 2. Oh, Bill. Bill, again, in the top 16 as well, making some chat, some light of chat going on. I love it. Chris Schoenthal, who is a Hall of Famer, as well as Greg Shaw, wondering if Brian Fred is playing Bidu. I highly doubt it. We might see Bidu in game number 2 if Scott decides to play his Darkside Musicians deck. There's the Devastator V, as we see that Brian is flashing the Devastator to pull a matching pilot. And who is the matching pilot but Darth Vader V himself, going down to Naboo, just like in the movies. Brian uses We Must Accelerate Our Plans to deploy the Blockade flagship from his reserve deck. Again, we did see him just check out what's in his deck, so he easily should be able to see tell that it was in there and pull it from there. And again, because this is a late night game, we're going to try and give away as many GIMP AI packs and other prizes out to you viewers as we can. So please participate, and you might get yourself some exciting new packs. Admiral Piet going down to the Devastator as well. Brian's going to pull a Commander or an Admiral's Order. He's going to go with Commander Brandy. Again, that is a V card. He is a pilot who adds 2 to the power, 3 if he's on the Judicator. Your total battle destiny is here is +1 for each TIE subtype here, or board the same starship. And then during your turn, you may pull 1 Launch Bay or non-unique TIE. So pretty cool little card. And there's Captain Kirgy V going down to the Devastator as well. Captain Kirgy is going to look at the top card of Scott's deck. And Scott has to lose a force, so he did hit on a character. Again, if it is a character card, you may reveal it, and the opponent loses 1 force. If it's a rebel, you may place it into the use pile. And Scott's going to lose the Domain of Evil from his hand. So let's go ahead and do our first trivia question as we go into Scott's second turn, as he will probably use the Dagobah system to pull a card. Or at least check out what's in his deck. Nope, he's going to go straight into his activate phase and into his control phase. As we see him draw Destiny for Great Warrior. Draws a 4. Or, I'm sorry, it's going to be a 5. He adds 3. It becomes an 8. I believe with Leia's ability that should complete it. Qui-Gon Jinn, Serene Jedi is drawn. Now he can cancel and redraw that with Yoda. He will do that. Currently, Blaster Deflection is the highest Destiny. And see you around, kid, for a 6. I believe that's going to complete the Jedi test. And yes, Scott will complete his first Jedi test. As Leia scores a 15, only needing a 12 to complete it. So I did promise a trivia question. Your first trivia question. First person in the chat who can tell me what the underlying card of On the Verge of Greatness is will win a GIMP AI pack. Again, first person in the chat who can tell me what the underlying card for On the Verge of Greatness is will win yourself a GIMP AI pack. And our Hall of Famer, Chris Schoenthal, is correct. So Chris Schoenthal definitely gets his first one. Do not worry, everybody. You will get more chances to win yourself some packs as we continue. As we see Qui-Gon Jinn, Serene Jedi going down to the Scarif Citadel Tower. Not a site that you normally see being played. I do like that Brian is showing us some cards that we don't normally see, such as the Death Star V, the Scarif Citadel Tower, and the Darkside Scarif system. Qui-Gon Jinn's lightsaber, the Destiny 5 one, goes on to Qui-Gon. And I'm going to pull up a notepad just to make sure that I actually remember who gets our GIMP AI packs. because it is late. I should be sleeping, and I'm enjoying a nice little drink. Scott does forget to move Leia. However, Brian Fred, being the nice guy that he is, allows for a Reaver. And Brian even says so in the chat. Brian says, you know I'm not going to deny you. As we see Scott go ahead and play See You Around Kid. He's going to put a card back on the bottom of his used pile to take a card out of his force pile. And we do know that Brian is threatening a drain of 2 up there in Naboo. There's Battle Plan going down for Scott. Scott with 3 defensive shields already on the table. Brian Fred using Imperial Code Cylinder to go get a non-spy captain or Krennic into hand from his reserve deck. Should be hitting on a non-spy captain as he has no force pile, use pile, and he's only got 1 card in his lost pile. He's going to grab Captain Godhurt. Again, not a card you normally see. Captain Godhurt adds 3 to the power of any capital starship he pilots. While aboard a Star Destroyer, adds 1 to the armor, adds 1 to the hyperspeed, and once during each of your move phases may cancel the landing claw at the same sector, system or sector. So there is a card that is a bullet card for everybody's favorite light side device, landing claw. As we see Brian goes into his activate, activates 16. Both players getting 16 force here. Do expect to see Brian drain for 2 at the Naboo system. Scott playing Hear Me Baby, Hold Together as a used interrupt to go get a shield. He'll go get the Goldenrod shield. A little point of trivia, Goldenrod originally designed as an effect, and the original concept was created by Michael Pistone as the Professor V. There is the Don't Do That Again going down, because as we saw that Scott played Perimeter Scan. Again, that card goes to the use pile, and Perimeter Scan is in the use. Don't Do That Again is on the table. Scott with 5 defensive shields now, as he'll use his Don't Do That Again to pull an immediate effect. And he's going to grab himself a legendary Starfighter, a card that we don't see a lot of anymore. Brian uses Force Push V to put 2 cards from his hand into his force pile to take 1 card of his choice out of it. Again, all this is in Brian's activate phase. And Gorski, thank you for subscribing for 18 months. Force Push goes to the lost pile. Now, even if Brian retrieves it, it is essentially a dead card. However, it's a dead card that still has a destiny of 5. Brian pays 3 to drain for 2 at Naboo. And Scott is going to play It Could Be Worse. He's going to reduce the loss by 2. Brian grabs the It Could Be Worse. And Scott is not taking any damage now. However, Captain Kurgi is going to look at the top card of Scott's deck. Brian is analyzing it. And it is not a character. Commander Brandine hops onto the Devastator. It is a pretty nicely loaded up Devastator. And there's an dreaded Imperial Starfleet going down for Brian Fred. That's going to allow him to start canceling drains. All he has to do is put a non-unique. All he's got to do is put a non-unique Starfighter on there, and it will cancel any drain that Scott does. And Brian's going to play Failure at the Cave. Power Opponent's undercover spies are immune to double agent while a Jedi test on table. Projection of a Skywalker is canceled. If Grimtosh just revealed your hand, you may place up to 2 cards from hand into your use pile. Commander Brandine's going to go grab a non-unique tie or a launch bay. He's going to go grab a TIE Scout. Popular card used to pilot and find hidden bases. Grand Admiral Thrawn also on the Devastator. Probably going to see Brian use the TIE Scout to cancel some drains. Brian going into his draw phase. Drawing, he's got 10 cards in his hands so far. He'll draw one more, pass turn over to Scott. Scott hoping to complete test number 2 here. As test 2 is the one that says that your opponent needs total ability of 6 or more to draw Battle Destiny. Correct. Greg Shaw is explaining the test, the rules of Jedi testing. Again, Great Warrior is the card that allows that. Each time you complete any Jedi test, you may exchange 1 card in hand for 1 Jedi test in your lost pile. As Scott draws an escape pod and we're doomed for his first Destiny, draws a blaster deflection for the second one. And Scott will take the blaster deflection into hand. And Scott hits changing the odds for his last Destiny. So it looks like Scott will complete Jedi test number 2. And after he completes Jedi test number 2, he's going to be able to exchange a card with his in hand to grab the Domain of Evil. Once he deploys that, he'll complete Jedi test number 3. As he has the Way of Things on the table. The blaster deflection is going to go to the lost pile. And Scott's going to drain for 1 at the Citadel Tower. There goes the TIE Scout from Brian's hand onto the dreaded Imperial Starfleet, canceling the drain. However, it was only a drain of 1, but interesting to see that Brian's just going to cancel it. And again, more interesting to see that Scott went and paid 3 to drain for 1. Brian plays his impressive Enforcement Shield. There's Domain of Evil, targeting Daughter of Skywalker and Yoda. Domain of Evil goes on to the jungle. The Way of Things immediately completes Domain of Evil. Now Scott is going to have the ability to subtract 1 from all of Brian's destinies. I believe it is only in battle, though. No, it is all destiny. So even if Brian was going to draw Destiny to use Commence Primary Edition, Scott could subtract 1. Now the real question is Scott training to test number 4? I am not sure, but Scott is drawing some cards. Drawing up to 11. Scott probably trying to assemble his space fleet here. Draws up to 14, passes turn over to Brian, saving 6 cards in his force pile. Brian activating 16. He has 17 cards in his force pile. There's a drain of 2 at Naboo. As we see Scott lose Meditation V from his hand. And he'll lose Nar Shaddaa as well. Again, being that Brian Fred has not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 Battleground systems on the table, I don't think Scott is worried about going to Nar Shaddaa. Captain Kirgi will take a peek at the top of Scott's deck. Brian will reveal it, showing that it is a character. Scott having to lose one. And he'll lose See You Round Kid off the top of his force pile. There's the Thunder Flare going down to Naboo. Going down for 6 force. The Cedar Fleet Systems going on to Milwaukee. Milwaukee V. Not to be confused with Milwaukee that's in Wisconsin. Now each time that Brian Fred deploys a TIE Fighter, he can pay 1 to retrieve 1. Captain Goddard hops onto the Thunder Flare as a pilot. He's driving that Star Destroyer for only 2 force. The Star Destroyer's dock. Probably going to see Captain Kirgi hop on over to... No, first we see Grand Admiral Thrawn going from the Devastator to the Thunder Flare. And again, we're probably going to see Captain Kirgi up. Commander Brandine follows as well. And there's Captain Kirgi hopping on over to his Star Destroyer. Brian with 34 power up there. Admiral Piet and Darth Vader go over to the Thunder Flare as well. Interesting. And all of that movement cost Brian only 1 force. Brian's going to draw some cards. Pass turn over to Scott. As we go into Scott's turn, I do have another trivia question. First question involved on the Verge of Greatness. The second one is going to involve everyone's favorite Dagobah Jedi Master, Yoda V. The first person in the chat who can tell me who designed Yoda V will win a GEMP AI pack. Again, who designed Yoda V? And I will say this, if you have won a pack, you can answer the question, but you must give it to someone else. So, Chris Schoenthal, if you're still watching, I'm going to dictate that you will not be able to win it. And Kiss My Wookiee. Kiss My Wookiee, I know who you are, but I can't remember who you are. Please tell me who you are. Wayne. I thought so. It was on the tip of my tongue, but I couldn't remember. Yeah, you do. If you would have been here for the day that I had today, you would understand completely. And there's Han, Chewie, and the Falcon V going down to Scarif. So now we have Scott trying to establish himself up in space. Rick in the Queen's Royal Starship going down as well. Poe Dameron hopping on as a pilot onto the Rick's ship. Or is that Padme's ship? Not sure. Rey going down as well as a passenger, as the Queen's Royal Starship can only hold 2 pilots. Scott taking a card out of his used pile here. Now, what's interesting for Brian, once he deploys the TIE Scout to Scarif, and I am predicting that he will, he can then move the Thunder Flare from Naboo all the way over to Scarif. Not as a react, it's a free movement, and it's kind of annoying. I just got the weirdest feeling of deja vu. Ray chose her card. Scott shuffling up the used pile. Ray also grabbing the bottom card of the force pile. And Scott's going to go and recirculate and pass turn over to Brian Fred. Brian activates his 16 force and does drain for 2 at Naboo. There goes an Ezra Bridger and See You Around Kid off the top of the reserve deck. Clearly Scott is playing 2 See You Around Kids. Captain Kirgy taking a look at the top of Scott's deck again. And it does not look like he saw a character, so we move into Brian's deploy phase. And there's a TIE Scout going from the dreaded Imperial Starfleet down to Scarif. Brian's going to pay 1 to retrieve the force push that is sitting on top of his lost pile. And this is where things get fun. Unless you're Scott. Scott's going to play Out of Commission and Transmission Terminated to put the prepared defenses out of play. It looks like he's just cycling a Destiny 5 card. Grand Moff Tarkin hops onto the TIE Scout. I love it. Who would have thought Grand Moff Tarkin knew how to pilot a TIE Scout? And funny enough, that is Grand Moff Tarkin non-V. Adds 2 to the power of anything pilots. When with Vader in a battle, once per battle, may cancel one opponent's destiny just drawn. When was the last time you saw Grand Moff Tarkin played in a open event? As we see as we see Brian initiate a battle, there's the trigger from the On the Verge of Greatness. The Thunder Flare moves from Scarif from Naboo all the way over to Scarif, bringing all that stack of characters over. Brian plays Not Within Sight or Reach to stop Scott from adding a Destiny to power. Brian plays Imperial Command to limit Scott to 1 battle destiny up there. Scott will grab it with the grappling hook. Brian draws a 1 for destiny, as again, it is Grand Moff Tarkin non-V. He only has about a battle destiny of 0, the destiny of 1. Scott will subtract 1 from it with Domain of Evil. It's going to become a 0. No Grand Moff Tarkin V, so no redraw for Brian Fred. And he draws another 1. Ouch! Brian drawing such good destiny there. Has a total power of 28. I'm sorry, 21. Scott draws a 1 for destiny as well. Everybody loves drawing 1s tonight. Scott is going to be down by 11 in power. Brian says, this has been the saddest destiny I have ever seen. I will not disagree with you, Brian. Now, I believe that because Darth Vader V is up there, he can Brian can subtract 2 there. No, Grand Moff Tarkin is just going to straight up cancel it. But again, Scott has down by 12 in power. He'll lose the Hujix from the top of his use pile. There goes a relatively unprotected as well. Anakin's lightsaber from hand. Tandem 4 V from the top of the deck. Wedge in Red Squadron 1 off the top as well. There goes Rey to the lost pile. And the battle ends. As the TIE Scout hops onto the Thunder Flare. No, I'm sorry. It just ship stock, and Grand Moff Tarkin moves from the little cockpit onto the bridge of the Thunder Flare. Scott thinks that the On the Verge of Greatness is a completely silly deck. I will not disagree with him, but then again, Scott is the one who plays Court of the Vile Gangster Musicians, beating down players with plethora of power just from musicians. And Admiral Piet takes control of the TIE Scout. As we see Brian undock the TIE Scout from the Thunder Flare. He'll use one force to move the Scout from Scarif over to Naboo. He'll save 2 force and pass on over to Scott. Scott with 20 in life force, Brian with 23. So it's still anybody's game. However, Brian has no lost pile and Scott has 12 in lost pile. Scott drains for 1 at the Citadel Tower. Scott's going to lose an Overwhelmed from hand. Wow, that's a card. There's a Leia's Resistant Transport going down to Scarif. Scott's going to look at his reserve deck. Does not hit on a Resistance female character. And Obi-Wan Kenobi V hops onto the Queen's Royal Starship as a passenger. Scott can use Obi-Wan to lose 2 force to get a card from his lost pile, and he will do that. He's going to exchange 2 cards within his hand to grab a card out of his lost pile. Now the question is, which 2 cards is he losing, and what card is he going to get back here? He'll lose Honor of the Jedi and Luke Skywalker Rebel Scout to get Rey back. Rey hops onto the Resistant Transport as a pilot, getting Scott a card out of his use pile. Scott with 3 cards in hand to Brian's 8. And Scott's going to go out and get R2 Brave Little Droid. He's going to go get the AI version of it as the droid hops onto the Queen's Royal Starship, just like in the movies. Scott initiates a battle. Adds a Destiny to power. It's going to be a 5, so he's going to have 30 right in power right before Destiny. As we go to Destiny, Scott draws a 4 for his first Battle Destiny. Will Brian Fred cancel it with Grand Moff Tarkin? No, Darth Vader's going to subtract 2 to make it a 2. Yoda will take it into Scott's hand, as he's now canceling it and redrawing it to draw a 4. Scott will add 1 with heading for the medical frigate, making it a 5. And there's Grand Moff Tarkin canceling it. And Scott will then draw a 5 for his only Battle Destiny. However, he plays You Do Not Have Your Moments. He's going to add 3. It's going to become an 8. Scott with 38 in power. I am sorry, he has 39, as I forgot to add Ray, who adds 1 to the total power. I'm sorry, the total destiny. Brian draws a 5. That is 10 times better than what he drew last turn. As R2-D2 brave little droid hops off the starship into the use pile to cancel it, and Brian draws a 3. Scott will subtract 1. And unfortunately, though, Leia's resistance transport has no immunity to attrition. However, Yoda is sitting at his hut. He'll reduce the immunity to attrition by 2, bringing Scott to 0 in attrition, and Scott will not lose anything in that battle. Brian down by 11 in power and has 7 into attrition. As we see Brian taking his time, thinking about what he wants to lose off the Thunder Flare. And there's Greg Zinn. Hi, Greg. Greg, the developer of At Peace. We've talked about you and how we all love At Peace and the fact that it does not retrieve any cards. And no, that was not just like the movie, as the Thunder Flare was not in Rogue One. As we see Overwhelmed, Force Push, and Senior Fleet Systems all go to the lost pile from Brian's hand, he also will then forfeit Darth Vader V from the Thunder Flare to the lost pile. Chris Schoenthal, who is a Hall of Famer, saying that you're not forced to play At Peace. And no, it is a choice. But is it the right choice? As we see Scott grab Admiral Raddus with Rebel Leadership V. Leadership goes to the use pile, and Raddus goes into Scott's hand. Commander Brandine will go try to pull a non-unique TIE Fighter, however he misses, with Brian having 5 cards in his reserve deck. Captain Kirky taking a look at the top card of Scott's deck. He'll not reveal a character, and Brian's going to pay 3 to drain for 2 at Naboo. There goes a gold leader and gold 1 from the top of the reserve deck, as well as your insight serves you well. And there's another Darth Vader V hopping onto the Thunder Flare as a pilot. A TIE Scout hops down as well. Brian's going to pay 1 to retrieve 1. He's going to retrieve Darth Vader V. And before we go into our next battle, why don't we do a trivia question? Our trivia question will be the first player And I'm just going to type it because, well, I was going to go type it. So the first player who can name me 3 virtual Star Destroyers that are currently not on the table will win a GIMP AI pack. Brian plays Imperial Command to prevent Scott from drawing more than 1 Battle Destiny. We saw that Admiral Shiranu is piloting the TIE Scout this time. Brian getting 2 Battle Destiny, Scott only getting 1. Chris Kelly, you are the first player. Let's see. And you know what? Batmouse, you have said 3 different ones than what Chris has said, so you get 1. Talon John, you get 1. Greg Zid, you get nothing. And Ming, yeah, you know what? You get 1 too. Talon John, I'm sorry, who are you again? J.M. Warner, thank you. Scott draws a Hear Me Baby Hold Together for his Destiny to Total Power. Vader subtracts 2, however, Yoda will cancel it, taking it in hand. Scott draws a 3 for his Total Power. Brian draws a 4 for his first Destiny, Domain of Evil, subtracts 1, making it a 3. Brian draws a 3, Domain of Evil is going to make it a 2. Grand Moff Tarkin is going to cancel the escape pod, and we're doomed. And Scott's going to lose this battle. And Brian Fred's not going to have any attrition. Obi-Wan hops off the Queen's Royal Starship into the void and then goes into the lost pile. Brian draws a card, he draws another card, and will then pass turn. Both players with 3 cards in their hand. However, Brian has 22 cards in his life force. Scott currently has 17. Scott using the grappling hook to shuffle up Brian Fred's reserve deck. This is why I do commentary so late at night, because everybody says the silly stuff. Scott's going to drain for 1 at the Citadel Tower. However, Brian has a TIE Scout in his hand. He will cancel that drain. Scott's going to play the Escape Pod combo and Hear Me Baby Hold Together. He's going to go out and get himself another defensive shield. As you see him play Planetary Defenses onto the Citadel Tower. And that's going to cancel Commence Primary Ignition V. Huh. Well, that's an interesting little combination there. Planetary Defenses. Play on any site. This location may not be targeted by proton bombs. Cancels program trap here. Unless the Death Star Docking Bay 327 is on the table, Commence Primary Ignition is canceled. Chris and Greg, is that an intended combination? Admiral Radis hops onto the Resistant Transport. As we go into Scott's draw phase. And Scott's just going to add some cards into his hand. And we see Scott play out of commission and transmission terminated to place a random card out of Brian Fred's lost pile. And he hits the commence primary ignition V. I don't think Brian Fred is going to be flipping this turn. Actually, no, he might. Oh, okay. Thank you, Chris. So we're not going to see the Citadel Tower go boom. And Scott plays another out of commission and transmission terminated to put Overwhelmed out of play. That's kind of sad that he doesn't play it. I think he should, but that's just me. I want to see a flip version of the Scarif deck. Can we get some more helper cards for this deck, Chris? Pretty please. Scott plays another defensive shield. As we're in Scott's draw phase. You know what? Our next trivia question will be... I don't know yet. We're going to wait. Scott with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 defensive shields on the table. I think we're going to do one more trivia question to wrap out tonight. So once the game gets to that point, we'll do one more. And anyone can win this one. Brian's going to play We Must Accelerate Our Plans to take an effect of any kind from his deck into his hand, and he grabs one of the cards that Scott does not want to see. He grabs Lateral Damage. As we see him take a TIE Scout into hand with Commander Brandy. Brian activates his 13 cards. Going to see him. Yep, he does drain for 2 at Naboo. Scott losing a Grimtosh from his hand. As well as It Could Be Worse. Not to be confused with It Could Be Worse. Captain Kirky taking a look at the top card of Scott's deck. Lateral damage is deployed onto the Death Star V, targeting the Rick in the Queen's Royal Starship. As a TIE Scout hops down to Scarif, retrieving Brian one card from his lost pile. He'll get back to Xehanort Fleet Systems. As we see Brian initiate a battle up at Scarif. Brian already up by 14 in power. Scott draws a 3 for a Destiny to Toll power. Both players thinking about what they want to do here. As it moves on, Darth Vader is the first battle destiny for Brian Fred. Domain of Evil subtracts 1 from it. However, he then draws a 5. Scott responding to Brian's sighing, saying, "That's what you get for playing this. Domain of Evils will subtract 1. Changing the odds subtracts another. It is a total battle destiny of 3. However, it is a total battle destiny of 4. I do stand corrected. Scott draws a 1 for his first battle destiny. However, he can cancel that and take it into hand with the card itself. Scott takes Luke into hand. He'll draw a 4 for his next battle destiny. Again, Brian can cancel it. Or nope, he's just going to subtract 2 with Darth Vader. Scott responds by canceling it and taking it into hand. Scott will draw a 4. As we see him draw Rebel Leadership. Brian deciding if he wants to cancel it with Grand Moff Tarkin. Looking like he does not want to cancel it. I believe the next one should be a 5. However, Scott's plays heading for the medical frigate. He's going to add 1. It does become a 5. And Tarkin will cancel that one now. As Scott draws a 5 for his real battle destiny. His total battle destiny will be 6 because of Rey. However, Scott is down by 9 in power. As both players will have to lose at least 4. Or, I'm sorry. Scott will only have to lose 2 from the system. Brian will have to lose 4. As we see Admiral Shiradu crash and burn his TIE Scout as he goes to the lost pile. Scott loses Luke Skywalker, Rebel Scout, from his hand. He still has to lose 8. There goes a escape pod combo from his deck as well. And there goes Rey going to the lost pile as well. Scott with 9 in life force to Brian Fred's 22. This is game 1, Mr. Anthony Michael Howard. The TIE Scout moves from Naboo to Scarif. It will hop into the cargo hold of the Thunder Flare. And Brian's going to draw some cards here. As Scott will start, he's going to play another defensive shield using perimeter scan. He's up to 8. Scott will activate 10, indicating he does not want to battle. Greg saying in chat, he wants to see somebody play 10 shields. That way they win. As Brian's going to cancel the drain at the Scarif Citadel Tower using a TIE Scout. Anakin Skywalker Padawan Learner hops onto the Resistant Transport, joining Admiral Raddus. R2, brave little droid, hops down as well. That's going to cancel the lateral damage, bringing Scott back up to 26 in power. As Scott recirculates, saving himself 7 force in his life force. He still has 6 in hand. Brian 4 in hand and 19 in life force. Brian drains for 2 at Naboo. As we see Qui-Gon Jinn, Serene Jedi, go to the lost pile. And there goes a legendary starfighter. Captain Kurgi taking a look at the top of Scott's deck. As another TIE Scout will be deployed, retrieving Brian Fred 1 point of force. As we see Brian move his TIE Scouts all throughout the star system. Moves the Devastator over as well. Brian not afraid of any of those TIE Scouts being jumped. Okay, we see that Scott activates 3, drains for 1 at the Citadel Tower. Brian will deploy a TIE Scout, canceling the drain. And before we go into Scott's battle phase, I do anticipate a battle there at Scarif. Your last trivia question is, the first person who can name me all 10 Darkside Admirals will win a pack. As we see Brian Fred deploy the Fanfare Shield. Again, if Qui-Gon's going to deploy Meditation from the Lost Pile, getting Scott another card out of his Lost Pile. Brian's going to shuffle up his reserve deck. Go into Scott's battle. And Scott will initiate. As we see Brian play Not Within Sight or Reach to prevent Scott from adding a designated power. Scott will grab that card. And he'll play Out of Commission and Transmission Terminated to place a card randomly from Brian Fred's Lost Pile out of play. He'll hit Overwhelmed. Brian plays Imperial Command to add a Battle Destiny. He'll be drawing 3. Chris Kelly says Shiranu, Madi, Madi V, Ozzel, Ozzel V, Piet, Piet V, Trench, Thrawn, and Thrawn V. And it looks like Chris Kelly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Chris is the first person. So, Chris, congratulations. You have won yourself another GEMP AI pack. I'm sorry, Batmouse. You were just a second too late. As we have Battle Up in Space. Grand Moff Tarkin, so Scott draws Rebel Leadership for his Battle Destiny. Grand Moff Tarkin will cancel it. Scott draws heading for the medical frigate. Shenanigans are being played. Brian draws a 3 for his first Battle Destiny. Scott will subtract 1. Scott does draw a total Battle Destiny of 5. Brian draws a 5 for his next Battle Destiny. R2, Brave Little Droid, will cancel it. And Brian will draw a 6. Which is something that is greater than 5. Brian draws the best number to draw for Destiny, from what I hear. Scott loses Admiral Radis. There goes a TIE Scout to the lost pile for Brian. Again, Scott initiated this battle. Still but down by 13. And Brian's going to try to blow up the shield gate. I'm sorry, I believe Scott was trying to blow up the shield gate. The TIE Scout goes to the lost pile, and Scott's going to peel, dumping the remainder of his life force into his lost pile, and Brian Fred will take game 1 by 19. Scott's saying, thanks for the horrible game. So there you have it. Brian Fred takes game 1 by 19. He's got 1 in his lost pile to Scott's greater than 1. So thanks to everybody for watching. It has been a pleasure. I hope you guys had as much fun as I did. Make sure you guys tune in. We'll have more streams going on, especially once the top 8 starts up. That's all I got for tonight. Everybody take care, enjoy yourselves, and as always, may the Force be with you. Good night, everybody.